Chess YouTube, welcome back, and welcome to the Armageddon game that Gukesh D just played against Fabiano Caruana in round number 4 of the 2025 Norway Chess Tournament. And this game right here was simply insane. Gukesh showing his very finest chess, really showing why he is the current reigning world champion. All right, Armageddon. The rules of Armageddon are simple. White has 10 minutes on the clock, black has 7, and white here, a draw is not okay. He has to win the game as white. Otherwise, he loses all the points for this game, whereas black can win or draw. So the pressure is on Gukesh to make things happen, to find a way to win. So what will he do in this Armageddon game as white? Well, he starts knight f3, black goes knight f6, and then Gukesh, he impersonates Hikaru and plays the move b3, heading for the Nimzo-Larsen opening. The idea behind the opening, very, very simple. He's intending bishop b2, likely e3, and then some sort of flexible play in the center. Now, black here goes d5. We have bishop b2, and then c5. So black playing a very, very logical setup. d5 and c5 in the spirit of the queen's gambit with white. And now Gukesh, of course, goes e3. So Gukesh, again, the idea, he has ideas like bishop b5, d4, c4, and so on. Overall, it's a very, very flexible way to play as white, and it's actually not the worst choice in an Armageddon game. The point being, of course, white has to get some sort of unusual position where he has winning chances, and this is certainly a way to maintain the tension and try to get black off guard in a really weird, unfamiliar opening. All right, Fabiano, in this position, he plays what is essentially the current meta at the highest level. He plays this move g6, intending bishop g7, and this really does seem to be the way that most top players play against the Nimzo-Larsen as black in this position. Now, Gukesh, of course, he is fully prepared for this line as white. He's not just playing it on a whim. This guy knows everything about every opening, or at least it certainly seems that way, because here he plays the key idea, c4, pressuring d5, and this move is especially strong here because black would like to play the move e6. However, if he goes e6 with g6 also being on the board, then his dark squares will be incredibly weak in the center, on the king side, and so on. So white here, Gukesh, finding the absolute most precise way to punish the early g6 by black. Now here, Fabiano, he takes on c4, not allowing c takes d5 ideas. And now, the strongest move for white, the simplest, is capturing on c4 with the bishop, but instead, Gukesh, he takes back with the b-pawn. This is super interesting. Gukesh, he's doing everything he can to get Fabiano in some sort of unfamiliar opening where he might make a mistake. So Gukesh here, prioritizing surprise value and getting a novel position over just objectively, is this the strongest move? So very, very interesting. All right, black, bishop g7, bishop b2, castles, castles. The last two moves, both sides, don't require a big explanation. Both sides developing and castling and so on. And really, we are about to enter the middle game. Both sides have castled, they developed, and now it's time to start making some concrete threats in the center. Will white go d4? Will black go for the b5 advance? We'll have to wait and see. All right, now here, black. Knight c6 is the move. A good square for the knight. Nothing unusual there. White goes d3, supporting c4 in advance, and maybe setting up the idea of e4, which actually could be quite the strong idea. All right, now, black. Rook to b8. This is a very telling move. Black here likely intending a6 and then b5, a very typical idea in this pawn structure. White goes knight c3, black goes a6, and then white goes a4. So black here threatening b5, and white simply clamping down on that square as well. So far, so good. Both sides making very, very logical looking moves. Now black here goes b6, intending potentially bishop b7, a pretty typical move here for black. And then we have queen d2 for white, getting his queen off the back rank. And here, Gukesh, he's basically gotten exactly what he wanted for this game. A relatively unusual position in an unusual opening where he's developed, he's castled, his rooks are connected, and now he's basically ready to start active operations in the center and to try and pressure black. So what will Fabiano Caruana do in this position? Well, he continues with a very active and very logical idea, bishop f5. This is likely the best square for the bishop, and now the bishop is vulnerable to an e4 advance. If Gukesh wants it, he can go e4, pushing back the bishop, but the problem with that move is it would weaken d4 permanently. So with that in mind here, black, he doesn't do that. White, he doesn't go e4 yet. Instead, rook fd1 is the move for Gukesh. So again, Gukesh just simply maintaining all the tension in the position and developing. Now black goes queen d7, and here both sides have basically finished their development. Both sides have the queens off the back rank. The rooks are connected on b8, f8, as well as a1 and d1. So now, what will white go for? After all, Gukesh D, he has to find a way to play for a win. He can't just go for a draw. If he gets a draw, he will lose all the points available for the Armageddon game. So, what does white do? He goes knight d5, jumps up with the knight, and pressures the black knight on f6. And this is really uncomfortable for black. If black takes on d5, then white has the option of just taking on g7. And that would be very, very good for white. But if black does nothing, then white takes on f6, and black may have to double his pawns on the f-file. That would also not be good for black. So Gukesh finding a way to put just a little bit of pressure on the black position and force some sort of concession just like this. So what will black do in response to the very strong move knight d5? Well, here Fabiano, he plays the move bishop e6. Now, this move looks logical. You pressure the knight on d5. You get out of the way of the future e4 advance. However, it does nothing to slow down knight takes f6 as Gukesh played in the game. This move right here is very, very strong. Again, the idea being if black takes with the e-pawn, then black gets these very ugly doubled f-pawns. However, if black takes with the bishop, white just takes on f6 anyway, and black still gets those very, very ugly f-pawns. However, the difference is in this scenario, black also doesn't have the bishop on g7 covering the dark squares. So overall, I think Fabiano played the right decision and took on f6 right away with the e-pawn. And yes, the bishop on g7 for right now isn't very active, but at the very least, you do maintain that piece covering those dark squares, which should be very important later in the game. All right, now, Gukesh, bishop c3. A very simple move with a very powerful idea behind it, and on the next move, he does show the idea. Here, Fabiano goes a5, trying to clamp down on the queen side, maybe intending knight b4 and so on, but here, Gukesh, he shows the real idea behind bishop c3. He swings the queen over, queen b2, and here, white has the double attack on b6. Yes, that pawn is supported for now, but also the attack on f6, and that pawn is very weak and very vulnerable. So the queen and the bishop forming a powerful battery on the long diagonal. Gukesh D finding these subtle ways to maximize the pressure on the opponent's position, just move by move, crushing the opponent and their hopes in the game. All right, Fabiano, he sees the threat. He goes queen to e7, simply supporting f6 with the queen, a very logical-looking move. But now, Gukesh, knight d2. He drops back with the knight, maybe intending knight e4 ideas, or even bishop f3 ideas, a very simple retreating move with lots of ideas behind it. All right, now here, Fabiano, he's getting tired of sitting around and waiting. He lashes out with the move knight to e5, jumping in with the knight. However, here, Gukesh, he sees the right response. You don't take the knight. If you do that, black takes back, and suddenly that pawn on e5 will be supported by the bishop, and black will be doing excellent. So, instead, what white does here is the move d4, advancing in the center, targeting the knight, and beyond that, white is also threatening the key idea of d5. If white can get d5 in, that would also be incredibly strong here for him. All right, what will black do in response? Well, here, Fabi knows if he just goes back to, say, d7, then d5 comes, and white gets a massive initiative. So with that in mind here, he actually takes on d4 first. C takes d4 is played in the game. Then we have e takes d4, and then knight d7. The knight drops back. But of course, here, Gukesh, he always has the option of d5 later in the game. Now, Gukesh knows d5 right away, believe it or not, is not the right idea. The one problem with that move is if you go d5 too early, then black could take on d5. The point being after c takes, then the bishop on e2 would hang. So back in this position, black has the x-ray pressure on the bishop with the queen. So Gukesh, he sees this and he slides the rook over, rook to e1, supporting the bishop on e2 and attacking the queen on e7 behind it. Very, very strong stuff here. All right, Fabiano Caruana, he's on the ropes. What does that even mean? I'm not sure, but he's on the ropes. Gukesh is applying so much pressure on his position. d5 is being threatened. c5 is being threatened. White has so many ideas here. What will Fabiano do in response? Keep in mind, Fabiano is a perennial top 5 player. He's been in the top 5 since like almost forever. This guy is just always right around 2,800 ELO, no matter when he's playing. Every tournament, he's always there to win. So what does Fabiano Caruana do when he's under this much pressure by the world champion? Well, as they say, at the GM level, the super GM level, when in doubt, you go full alpha zero. Here, Fabiano Caruana, h5 is the move because why not? Pushing the pawn, threatening potentially h4, h3, which is nowadays basically the single most dangerous attacking idea in all of chess, or at least that's my personal opinion. But this idea just crops up in so many different positions. All right, now Gukesh, he's unfazed, goes d5, pressuring the bishop, forcing it back. Black goes bishop to f5, but now bishop d3 attacks the bishop as well as the queen. This being the other idea behind rook e1 played earlier, setting up the discovered attack on the queen if the right opportunity arises. And this is definitely that moment. Here, there's no easy way to defend the bishop. In fact, the only square that would do it would be, say, on the e-file, and all of those squares are being covered by the rook. Therefore, the queen goes to d6, but this lets Gukesh take on f5. We have bishop takes, then g takes, and look at the pawns on the king side. Gukesh D has broken the king side of Fabiano Caruana, and here, Black is just strategically losing. How on earth did Gukesh D achieve such a position against none other than Fabiano Caruana in this game? It is truly mind-bending stuff how good Gukesh D is when he's playing his best chess. All right, now, Gukesh, queen to c2. He slides the queen over and pressures f5. Very simple, but very, very strong. Now, Fabi, in response, queen to f4 is the move, marching down with the queen and defending f5. Then we have rook to e3. The rook jumps up and simply threatening ideas like rook f3, targeting the pawn on f5, which is now very, very weak. And beyond that, ideas like rook g3 or h3 could also be played later in the game. Either way, this rook is just so active on the third rank here. So, Fabi, knight e5 is the move, jumping down with the knight. Now, the one benefit of these triple pawns, I mean, there aren't many, but the one benefit of these pawns is you can plop a piece like the knight on, say, e5, and if white takes on e5, black can recapture and untriple his pawns temporarily. So that is one decent idea, one decent way to make use of these very, very unattractive pawns. But here, Gukesh, he sees one move deeper. He takes on e5, black takes back, and then rook to f3, targeting f5 behind the queen. Gukesh knows if that pawn falls, the pawns on e5 and h5 would also become incredibly weak, and therefore, black would be strategically losing once again. Now, Fabi, queen d4. The queen slides over. The point being, if white takes on f5 with the queen, the knight on d2 falls. Fabi being very, very tricky in this game. But here, Gukesh, he's not falling for any tricks, any traps. He goes rook d1, supports the knight, and sets up all kinds of discovered attacks on the queen. For example, knight b3, knight f1, and so on would also target the queen. Now here, the right move for black, and Fabi finds it, is the move e4. Very, very good. Now, instead, if you go, say, I don't know, f4 here, then knight to e4 literally traps the queen. The queen literally has nowhere to go, and black loses the game. So, Fabi going e4, giving his queen the very important retreat squares on f6 and e5. An excellent move. Now here, we have rook takes f5. Gukesh winning the pawn, now making e4 a permanent weakness and also targeting h5. And as this pawn falls on the f5 square, black's entire position begins to crumble. Now here, Fabi goes rook f to e8, supporting the pawn on the e4 square. A good move overall, but Gukesh, he's one step ahead. Knight to f1, retreats the knight, setting up knight to e3 ideas and attacking the queen. Keep in mind, when black went rook f to e8, the threat essentially was e3. And after f takes, queen takes, black might have a little bit of activity. But with knight f1, Gukesh D, he completely shuts down the idea of the e3 move, as the knight has that square on complete and total lockdown. So Fabi, queen c5 is the move. He retreats the queen. Then knight to e3, as expected, is Gukesh. Now queen d6. Rook takes h5. Gukesh winning the pawn on h5. And look at this. Gukesh is up 2 pawns. His knight on e3, completely uncontested. His pawns on c4 and d5, extremely strong. The queen's on c2 and the rook on d1, also very active. Literally every piece in the white position is synergizing perfectly. All right, queen g6 is the move. Attacks the rook on h5. But Gukesh, he sees this, and queen to e2 defends the rook with the best possible move. Now we have rook b to c8. Targeting c4 in certain lines, but of course, that wonderful knight on e3. I mean, that is the Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful Knight right there. Defends c4, and black is just getting shut down left and right. And Gukesh, this guy studied my system by Nimzovich, the legendary chess player who invented the Nimzo Indian opening, and he knows that passed pawns must be pushed, and he plays the critical move d6, threatening d7, threatening the fork on the rooks on e8 and c8. What an idea by Gukesh. Of course, Fabi, he sees this. Rook c, d8 is the move, defending, but now d7 targets the rook on the e8 square. Now we have rook to e6, then rook h d5. Gukesh slides over the rook, defends d7 in advance, and here, again, Gukesh has the game on complete and total lockdown. Now, bishop e5 is the move. The bishop slides down. What is Fabi trying to do? I'm not sure. Maybe the idea is targeting h2, with ideas like queen to h6. That might be the idea. But here, Gukesh, he spots the threat, and he shuts it down with my favorite move on the chessboard, at least from white's perspective. That is the alpha zero move, h4. Here we go. Gukesh bringing every piece into the attack, even the alpha zero h-pawn. And the threat now, potentially, is h5, knocking back the queen. A very committal move, a very aggressive move, but certainly a good move in the position. All right, now here, Fabi, f5 is the move. He's getting his f-pawns rolling. His idea, potentially f4, and actually, honestly, Fabi, despite the computer saying black is completely toast here, black is starting to get some counterplay on the king's side. And Gukesh, he still has to play very precisely because the game is just insanely chaotic here. All right, Gukesh, c5 is the move, gaining space on the queen's side. And here, Fabi, f4 is the move, attacking the knight. But before that knight moves one square, Gukesh plays the move h5. The alpha zero pawn targets the queen, forces it back. The alpha zero intermezzo move, queen to f7. The queen slides back, but then knight g4. The knight jumps up, and very importantly, Gukesh knows if black takes on h5, white goes knight to f6, bada boom, bada bang, forks the king and the queen and wins the game. Therefore, taking on h5 is simply not an option. With that in mind, what the heck is Fabiano Caruana, the perennial top 5 player, supposed to do here? That he is just being squeezed left and right. I mean, not to mention the bishop on e5 is under attack. Gukesh has so many threats going all across the board. Here, Fabi, bishop c7 is the move. He retreats, and very importantly, later in the game, this bishop also defends the critical d8 square. A very, very key idea. But here, Gukesh, he continues. C takes b6, bishop takes b6, then rook d6, targeting the rook, targeting the weak bishop on b6. And from there, white may even go, for example, queen b5. Again, further increasing the pressure. What will Fabi do? He goes king to f8. The king now trying to defend, maybe intending king to e7 ideas. But now, queen to b2. The queen slides over, targets the bishop, threatens queen takes b6. But beyond that, queen to h8. The key idea, when the king slides over, it relinquishes control of the h8 square, and therefore the queen can infiltrate on h8 with deadly ideas. Now here, Fabi, bishop c7 is the idea, attacking the rook, but here, Gukesh, he simply says, no problem, I'll take on e6, black takes back, and then bada boom, bada bang, queen to h8. The queen flies in, targets the king on the f8 square, and after king to e7, queen to g7, the attack is looking incredibly strong. All right, black tries to defend. Queen to f7, queen g5, king f8, knight to e5. The knight targets the queen. Yet another piece has entered the attack. Here, Fabiano Caruana, queen to b3. The queen flies down. But here in this position, Gukesh D, he finds the showstopper move to seal the deal, to win the game, to continue the attack, and he attacks with the move rook to d6. What a brilliant move. Gukesh D here attacking Fabiano Caruana stronger than I attacked my Chipotle dinner. What is the idea? It's simple. Here, rook to f6 is the threat, bringing yet another piece into the attack. But wait a minute. I know what you're thinking right now. I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute. Dr. Mike Jansen, that's my real name. Dr. Mike Jansen, what if you just take the rook? What happens then? Then the rook on d8 falls, and it is checkmate in like 5 moves. Queen takes d8, king g7, queen g5, king h7, queen g6, king to h8, d8 promotes to the queen. Then it's bishop f8, queen takes, queen to g8, queen takes, and white wins the game. So back here in this position, Fabiano Caruana, he doesn't take on d6. He doesn't give Gukesh the pleasure of that beautiful, beautiful checkmate. Instead, e3 is the move. Fabiano Caruana fighting until the bitter end. But here, Gukesh, rook to f6, and in this position, Fabiano resigns on the spot. And here's why. If you go king to e7, among other ideas, white has so many ideas here. For example, queen to g7 leads a checkmate. But beyond that, I can also go rook b6, targeting the queen and the king. I mean, white has so many different ways to win on the spot. And for that reason, in this position, right here, Fabiano Caruana resigns in the Armageddon game in round 4 of the 2025 Norway Chess Tournament versus the reigning world champion and Indian prodigy, Gukesh D. Wow, what a game. All right, Chess YouTube, if you want to support Gukesh D and this channel, comment a capital G down below for Gukesh. Give me a capital G, smash that like button, and you know, comment whatever you want below. I am going to start reading comments very, very soon. I've been avoiding it for a while, but I am getting back into my rhythm. And beyond that, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.